Hey everyone, welcome to a Monday. Welcome to February, and welcome to horrendous.
There's no news today, is there?
Oh no, horrendous weather. Horrendous weather here in the great state of Pennsylvania.
It's weird when Buffalo's got the better weather. What the hell's going on here?
So where I am, I think I'm. Am I north of you, both you guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you at? So I'm trying to think. I'm northeast. So I'll just say where
I'm like Montgomery County, so
I'm tipping northeast Philly. So
yeah, so I'm north and west of you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the dreaded north and western suburbs.
You're very north of me.
But here it's mostly like this really weird freezing rain type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we're getting
here. Lovely stuff.
And we got some good. We got about 6 inches before that, but then it went away. And now that I just got an alert that we're getting 5 to 12 additional inches before.
Yeah, that's the next round.
Yep.
So it's not, but it's weird because you look on the radar, it says it's snowing here, but it hasn't been snowing here for a while.
Chicken feed.
But yeah, it's 20. Yeah, it's like 20 degrees out and raining. So my rink, I'm gonna talk about that for just a second because the other night I was so psyched. It was finally the first time that it was ready to be skated on. Like this was 2 nights ago. I was out there. You might have seen my post on Instagram or.
I saw it and I was thinking, you poor schmuck. Something's
gonna
go wrong.
I got it going. It's been like all year, like I getting close and then not getting, then it raining, like having a 65-degree day and raining and getting close and then raining. And
did you evict the foxes?
No, the foxes are still there, which is hilarious. When I go out at 3 a.m, I hear them. And the other night, they're underneath the rink when I'm spraying water on the rink. They're underneath, and I hear them rustling around.
Were they seeing Fox on the Run?
I know. The other night, I look out from the rink, and there's two. Like I have a flashlight. The way I do it, of course, is it's the middle of the night, so I got the flashlight thing on my head. This little headlight.
Yeah. You got the minor
thing. So I turn it like this, and then 4 eyes, boom, like light up. 4 eyes light up, looking up at me from my grass. These two baby foxes, followed quickly by a much larger mother or dad fox, looking at me, grabbing both babies and putting them back underneath the rink. They don't care about me being on the rink, I guess, so it's fine. But yeah, it's pretty funny. But now, of course, I don't know what to do now. I've got perfect ice, and then this. Like, what does this do? Like, this is like.
That's why I said you poor schmuck. I knew something was going to happen.
The layers are going to be all like crazy uneven because of the wet.
It's going to be crazy. So last night I shoveled it once before I went to bed because I didn't want it to be like 12 inches.
Dry scraped.
I know exactly. I don't want to be like 12 inches of shoveling, like at once, like that would have killed me. So I shoveled it once in the afternoon, and I shoveled it once before I went to bed, and then of course it got another like 4 inches probably before it turned to this. So I don't know what the hell's happening now.
Well, okay, Russ, what do you have for the pre-show?
Quick pre-show. Major League Baseball is now at the point of absurdity where the agents are now openly complaining on Twitter because they still don't have an agreement as to how many game season they're having. And if you don't know how many game season you're having, how do you have a schedule? And they're supposed to start at the end of next month, and none of this has been ratified. It is a entire mess. I could use a different word, but I won't.
It's a cluster F is what it is. And this is the thing. Like anybody who looks at this objectively thought that the proposal from the major leagues was in part reasonable. They said 154 game schedule instead of 162, but the players are going to get full pay, and they were going to delay the start until I think May the 1st. But the thing that they threw in, which I think is what the Players Association rejected, was expanded playoffs and the DH. So there's going to be a compromise here, but clearly what Major League Baseball wants to do is push the start forward a little bit so they can get fans in the stands, and that the weather is better so they won't have rainouts because that'll screw up everything. But they've got to drop this DH stuff right now, because how the hell are National League teams going to go out and scramble for a DH at the 11th hour? It's stupid.
No, the whole thing is just absurd, and they're going to have to come to an agreement at some point, but it's already February, and they have until February 27th. So for people that want to complain about the NHL, they never cut it this close.
And you know what this is? This is both sides posturing because the CBA is up after this year. Right. They hate each other.
There will be a lockout. There will be
a lockout. The players want to screw over the owners. The owners want to continue screwing over the players. And you know what? Get ready for Major League Baseball starting in June next year, because these two sides suck.
And here's the teaser. I do have the list of who Pittsburgh Penguins are interviewing.
Oh, excellent. Looking forward to that.
Start with that.
Let's start there. All right, let's get going. Here we go. It's hello hockey world. It is Monday, February 1st, 2021.
I'm Michael DeAngelo in balmy Buffalo.
I'm Anthony Mangione in on Hoth right now, I think.
Yeah, I know.
My tauntaun will freeze before I reach the first marker.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology, same boat as the other guys, except Mike.
And I just crawled out of my tauntaun to come do the show. I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. We do it all year. We don't care if they're playing. We don't care if it's off season. We don't care if it's postseason, preseason, midseason, whatever it is. But today we have two events to talk about, at least two. But we're going to start with something more optimistic before we get into something that's kind of bizarre and messed up. Russ has the interview list.
I do have the interview list for
it was apparently flown there by some carrier pigeon.
I literally
It was a penguin.
I got it 2 minutes before the show. I scrolled it down.
Okay.
So as you would imagine, Alvin is on that list because he's already in house and in the interim, so that's a given.
Sure.
Ron Hextall is on the list.
Okay.
Yep.
And that would be very interesting. Of course, we know why. Kevin Weeks is on the list.
Okay.
We don't know why.
But Weeks has been. I've heard Weeks' name mentioned before, and
but he has never been an assistant GM, a GM. He's never been any of those.
Yeah, I agree. But his name has circulated.
Oh no, his name is circulated.
Yes,
but I'm just saying.
time we have actually known that.
I love the guy. I just, I think it's a stretch.
Yep.
JFJ, one of Mike's favorites, is on the list.
Please.
John Ferguson Jr. Michael Fuda is indeed on the list.
Good.
And Gillis.
Now, Scott Mellenby, according to Renaud Lavoie, was on the list, but he pulled himself out. He said he wanted to stay in Montreal.
Okay.
Elliot Friedman reported Joe Nieuwendyk as possibly being on the list, and also Jason Karmanos, which was weird because Jason Karmanos was an assistant GM who was let go when Rutherford was there.
Right.
So it would be sort of weird that he would be back in it, but I'm just reporting what Elliot.
I would say that's a remote thing. Yeah. I would be very shocked at that.
Now, Chris Drury, Russ, we heard
he's not on the list that I got.
Right. Okay. And Tom Fitzgerald was denied permission by the Devils apparently, and Jason Botterill's not on that list.
Right, and maybe Drury's not on it because maybe either the Rangers said no or he said no for now.
Yeah, sorry, I was listening, but my fire went out. I felt like I was maybe pouring propane into the house that would really be. It
would be exciting for the show. It could be Die Hard
because it's a wind. There's so much wind coming through that.
Well, Eck would have his very own "This is fine" meme in his very own house.
Yes.
It'd be like those YouTube videos with people dropping the frozen turkey into the hot oil.
I'll give you my top three. I'll give you who my top three in order would be for Pittsburgh if it were me. I would put Hextall 1, Fuda. I would put Hextall 1, Gillis 2, Fuda 3. That's what I would do.
I would not put. I would definitely put Fuda and Hextall because I think they can make deals and develop.
See,
yeah, key for them. That's a big thing.
You guys are missing something on that, though.
The making deals part, he has to prove to me, Ron.
Well, okay,
yeah,
but I'm sorry, man. Maybe I'm colored just by the experience of him in Vancouver. I would never hire Mike Gillis as general.
I don't know. Mike Gillis is a smart guy. He marries analytics and other things. He was the first guy with the sleep studies. He has done a lot of cutting edge things, and that's why Mike Gillis is a free thinker. That's why I would have him on my list.
Yeah, another name that popped up that's not on the list that I heard was Lawrence Gilman, the Leafs assistant general manager, and he seems to be on the list of everybody, but never gets the job. And you forgot Pierre Maguire. Come on,
he's not on the list.
There's the way assistant GMs do get their name out there as much as they can. They got to start the process of eventually being one of those guys that's considered. I mean, you look at all the assistant GMs that are hired; they were always interviewed for a couple years before they're hired. They generally interviewed other places, things like that. I think this is a no-brainer to Mike Fuda. I'm not shooting this.
Yeah,
he'd be a good hire for sure.
Yeah, I'm not shooting this against Hexy at all, but
no.
They both have shown that they can, of course, draft. They're both very good at part of that. They're both very good talent evaluators. Where they totally veer apart is in communication skills. Like communication skills are. Mike Fuda is an incredible communicator, and anybody who's ever talked to him knows that he's just like he tells you exactly what he's thinking. He's very good. Hextall tells, and I'm not talking about the media. I'm talking about the actual team.
No, in the organization you're talking about.
That's the area for Ron that has to be whenever he's going into an interview now. He has to basically sell himself on on what he learned from his time in Philadelphia. And the question is in terms of also, you'd have to go into some of the interviews that he's had since then in terms of what he has learned. And I think he was, again, at the end of the day, Ron is very strong-minded and wants what he wants and wants it done a certain way. And again, the buck does stop with the general manager, the final decision. But it literally, you cannot shoulder the load 100% without input from other places.
The one thing I'll say about Hextall, and maybe this carried over into the job, and my guess is I always felt like he did kind of run things independently with the Monarchs and did a great job. But I did feel like he probably did do a lot.
But it's different. But again, you're talking the Manchester Monarchs.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that's where he probably got it from, and that's why he carried that over into the Flyers.
Here's what happened in Philly. What happened in Philly, and I talked to a lot of people on the inside in Philly about the Hextall situation. The whole time it was happening, I was hearing the same things over and over again. Because I, typically say, "What do you think's going on?" And if I was to ask somebody in the organization what's going on, and they would, it's not uncommon for them to say, "Well, we don't. It's Hextall's decision. We don't know what he's doing or what he's thinking right now." And that's not absolutely absurd to hear that when I talk to somebody about the GM. GMs are like, they're kind of, they leave it to them. They leave it to GMs and they'll let the GM do their thing. But with Hextall, it would be more like, I wish we knew what he was thinking. We don't know what he's thinking. We can't seem to tell. He doesn't seem to want to share with us what he's thinking here. But we're going to let him go with it because so there's one thing to be a GM like Rutherford, who is leaving that position, very much did his own thing. But always communicated with it to the point where his communication, I believe, is what got him fired. Like him basically saying, "This is what I think we need to do. We need to move Letang. We need to move Malkin." And they said no. Basically that we're not going to. Malkin and Crosby are going to retire Penguins, and that's the way it's going to be. And so in Hextall's situation, you would never have that talk ahead of time. Hextall just kept everything to himself, and they let him go with it.
Which I always thought was rather ironic, whenever we had interviews with him, they said, you guys, it was kind of you guys will be first. And when I make something, you'll be the first to know. And and again, he's not beholden to tell the media what he's going to do.
Right.
But it was always interesting to hear that type of comment from him. And then
you wouldn't hear a thing.
You wouldn't hear a thing. And that to me was always interesting. Now, my list, Ak, I would say for me, again, I agree. Fuda would be probably number one. He's got the background. He has the communication skills. Again, the key thing for Hextall to be over Fuda is to be able to convince management, anybody's managing with, that those lack of communication is behind him. Honestly, I would put Gillis third in that list there because he has kind of been in circles, and I think he would be a part of that. And I'm not keeping Weeks out of the mix here. It would have shot me if the Penguins went completely left field here and bring in someone who has no management experience whatsoever because of the potential dynamic change, maybe the ideas he's wanting to put into play that might allow them to change. But again, if, as you stated, Rutherford wanted to make certain changes, and that's what got him out, then I don't see the Penguins really kind of going outside the norm there.
The one thing I'll give Hextall credit for that the Flyers did not do before he got there was, and I literally made them hide it from the media because I was covering it the first time they had their rookie camp, and the way they were doing all the measurements and training and everything, they did it out in the open. I was the only one there. I was writing about it, taking pictures, and then all of a sudden the next day it was hidden in the back and on the ice. But he was the first guy to do that in that organization. They didn't have any of that set up before Hextall, and now it's like the norm, and they've improved it. So that's something else you have to bring into
that's a Lombardi thing and a Lamoriello thing. Remember, the chain of command here is like Lamoriello, begat Lombardi, who begat Hextall. Like there's a whole thing there and these are all guys who are very quiet with the media, very quiet, but they do things differently, of course. The Flyers dynamic at that time when Hextall was there was interesting because Hextall and Clark both when Bob Clark was there, Bob Clark at that time, right? We've always called Bobby Clark, but Bob Clark is his manager. But when Clark is there, Clark and Hextall, they saw things very similarly, and they both didn't believe that you had to tell anybody what you were doing. They both didn't necessarily believe you had to be honest when you were making trades with people. Like, you could sit there and say, Hextall was better than Clark, who was notorious at lying to other GMs about things. But Clark was like, when Hextall would say, what should I say to him? Clark's not giving the information. Be out front with it. That's not what Clark's going to be telling him. And then you also had the Holmgren, Luco, other kind of thing going on there at the same time, which was a totally different kind of more out, more like transparent, more honest, like make deals that work for both teams. For us, this works for you, this works for us. Talk to the other GM and say, I think this deal's good for both of us. Holmgren was trusted, beyond a shadow of a doubt throughout the NHL. And I remember people always telling me about Holmgren. They would go to him and they would say, do you know what we can do here? And Holmgren was one of the first teams who wouldn't just make it up and say, like, yeah, I know exactly. Holmgren was like, no, I don't, but I'll get right back to you. That's something that that's the way Holmgren would work. He wouldn't just make up something to sound like he knew what was going on. Yeah. So the dynamic is very different. And I think that when you get into this situation now, you're talking about an owner and Mario Lemieux. Both those two guys know how much, what's the guy's owner's name again? Jeez, I can't.
Ron Burkle.
Ron Burkle, right? Who now owns, Graceland. Elvis is old. No, Graceland, not Graceland.
No, Neverland.
Neverland. Sorry, the other one. Neverland. Ron Burkle.
Big difference.
Big difference. Ron Burkle and Mario Lemieux. Two guys that very much want to know what's going on within the team. Two guys who have opinions, very strong opinions on the team. Mario especially has strong opinions about the Penguins. So if Mario's not going to be involved, if he's just, he's going to sell his ownership if he doesn't have any say.
I'm going to tell you my feeling. If Kevin Weeks gets the job, Mario's not involved. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mario
Burkle will be the business guy then, and they won't worry about what he doesn't know about business.
I mean, I could see Mario and Fuda working way better than I could see Mario and Ron Hextall working together.
Yeah, but there's no connection between Mario and Fuda.
No, but there's the opposite of a connection between Mario and Hextall. Whatever,
Well, yeah, I mean, right.
Fuda and Mario can.
The connection is that Hextall probably slashed him across the
probably many times. Yeah, I mean, Fuda can get along with anybody. Like he's the kind of guy who walks into a party and everybody's fine. So to finish my thought, Gillis. I am not a Gillis guy at all. I'm not a Gillis fan at all. The only thing I will say about him in this situation is we're in weird times. And what's going on right now with GMs, when you bring somebody into your organization right now, into a team without fans, a situation like just completely bizarre. Who knows what the cap's going to be? Are we going to have fans next year? Are we going to have this? It would help to have some experience in that situation.
And that's why
that's where Gillis has it. Gillis has the experience.
And that's why the name that wasn't on Russ's list that Elliot Friedman mentioned, which was Neuendijk, makes a lot of sense because he's been an assistant GM. He's been a GM. I believe Lemieux and him were teammates on the 2002 Olympic team.
Yeah, they haven't played together somewhere.
No, they never played together.
No, it's just on the Olympics.
It's in the Olympic team, but he's well known as a good guy and a good hockey man. But after the Dallas situation, really hasn't been in management. If he's back in the mix, that would make sense. That would be somebody I think who would add up would be pretty decent.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch. It's a fascinating team to take over. As a GM. It's full of challenges and excitement and different situations. This is
mass and tremendous egos that are going to be
tremendous egos.
Biggest ego, honestly. It's a tough spot for anybody to really
it's a real tough spot.
Win because you have the best, but two Hall of Fame, at least two Hall of Fame players there. One of which is going to be considered to be an all-time Hall of Fame player. The
other of which
doesn't necessarily want to be there.
Right. Yeah. The other which doesn't necessarily want to be there. Like
the owner who's got his ideas. It really is the absolute get your popcorn ready situation there.
Right. Like, and then you've got Mario Lemieux, one of the top 2 players or 3 players of all time. People's like, I mean, you've got it's insane. And then you have Pittsburgh, who is used to winning Stanley Cups. Like, this is a city that's used to winning Stanley Cups. They don't, and they don't have that. They're not going to get that next generational player unless they, get really bad and field an AHL team like they did before Crosby. But who knows? How this will play out. It's going to be great. But let's move on to the next story, which is South Jersey's own.
2 miles away from me.
You can say that proudly, Russ. That the guy, the player who grew up closest to you,
let's give the backstory a little bit.
Go ahead, give the backstory.
So, Anthony DeAngelo was on the ice for the game-winning goal on Saturday between the Rangers and the Penguins. Apparently, there was some misplay between him and Alexander Georgiev, that caused the goal to occur. I didn't see it, but that's what the reports are. Afterward, as they're both coming off the ice, DeAngelo makes a comment to Georgiev, and Georgiev goes after DeAngelo. Now,
which isn't in character at all, by the way.
Right. Now, who knows what? I'm sure it was a sarcastic comment and probably derogatory because he let in the goal and didn't cover up for the mistake that was made. The report today, I think it was Larry Brooks, said that Keandre Miller was the one who broke up the fight.
Right.
Afterward, it's unclear, but the next morning, DeAngelo has been placed on waivers. This is just the capper of this entire season where DeAngelo has been involved in social media stuff, has been involved in political stuff. I'm sure the Rangers don't want him to be involved in that.
He also goes back to juniors where he said something bad to a black player. Like, he's got all these things.
He has major character question marks.
Now there are factors here that have yet to be unproven, so I won't say them. But there are other things that supposedly inside the locker room have contributed to his fall from favor. And you got to remember, last year he had 53 points and was fourth in the NHL in scoring among defensemen, and I think was in the top dozen in voting for the Norris. So, and he signs the 2-year deal at $4.8 million per year. So he's placed on waivers. He clears waivers. Nobody knows what is going to happen here. There's been talk about terminating the contract, but that doesn't sound like that's going to fly because this is for. I mean, it's not for moral.
No. But
go ahead.
Okay, so here's what I was told. Right now, they probably are trying to terminate his contract, but because of the kind of waivers they put in, it really has to deal with just like the character / whatever other part, they can do it for.
Right.
And so I feel like there is something else at play. We hear all murmurs on all these other different things that have been shot down by agents and otherwise, but I do feel like there's something else at play, and that's why they're shooting for that. Now, don't be shocked that he cleared waivers because, again, nobody's taking DeAngelo at full money. The Rangers would have to eat a significant portion of his contract just to be able to trade him, if they could even trade him. I don't know if they can keep him on taxi squad all year. I don't think they can.
Sure they can.
No, but I mean without paying him. I don't think
I think they're going to – see, one way or the other, they're going to have to – if they terminate his deal, that's one thing. If they can't terminate his deal and he goes on and he's gone through waivers – he's going to be paid. It's a question of whether he's going to and right now they're taking the cap hit of like 3.8 for this year because after clearing waivers, if they put him on the taxi squad, you clear a little over $1 million. But the solution might be, if they can't terminate the contract, is a buyout after this year. And since he's under the age of 26, it's only 1/3 of the amount spread over the term. Remaining, which would be
sure, but now you've got like this gigantic hole in your blue line, which isn't great. They could bring up Tom Mario in it if they ever listen to me. But the other part of this, though, with DeAngelo,
no, they're not going to listen to you. Right?
I know.
Continue.
That's clear, or they wouldn't have drafted Hugh Jessamine. Anyhow, or Dylan McElrath. But anyhow, by the way,
he's got access to Grande Day, people.
with DeAngelo, though, I felt like. After the bubble, things had changed in him. Yes. We saw that, yes, he wanted to become this media guy, so he started the podcast. I told people, whoever wanted to listen, Mike, you guys, I thought it was a bad idea. I listened to it, and I know some people were like, well, I don't think it's that bad. I'll tell you what I thought was bad about it. What was bad about it is you're getting paid $10 million a year, and you're shooting your mouth off with the same guys you grew up with your buddies on a podcast when – clearly, the team would not like you to do that, whether it's off season or not. So he did that. Then he started up with people on Twitter. Then he had that alleged burner account on Twitter, which it looked like was him. And these are very embarrassing, stupid decisions to make, and I feel like it's derailed his on-ice performance.
Yes.
He's about a guy with 1 point in 10 games, and I think he was a -4 in that game that he gave up was on the ice for the game-winning goal. And so you take all that into account, and this is what the downfall of Tony DeAngelo is.
Oh, you're dead on. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, and it is interesting. We wonder why teams are so tough on like their players about when it comes to social media, and there's a good reason.
Why?
There's a good reason. I mean, first of all, there's a lot going on with your life already if you're an NHL player and you're young and you're going through all this. You got a lot to deal with. Throwing another component in there of just people ripping you on the internet is not what needs to be inside your head. Like,
right. And let me say this, because
not a lot of fun, I can tell you. For
a lot of people, and Anthony, I want to get your point of view on this, because we've talked about DeAngelo a bunch of times. I want to get it before I say what I say, because I mean, I think you have to ignore. You have to ignore. Maybe it's a factor, but you have to ignore the political aspect of this. I think it's interpersonal stuff with the team and play more than anything. And the stuff that we saw on the weekend, they got rid of this MAGA head and all this stuff. That has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is the fact that he's playing like crap and he's not getting along with his teammates. It has nothing to do with politics.
It's a locker room dynamic situation.
Right.
Now, there's just any question about that at this point. That does not mean that some of the other things that he's involved in doesn't. Sure. That we can't. It's not something you can completely
No, it's not.
It's a little bit of a chicken or egg in some cases.
That is a part of them. Is absolutely a part of the mix. But again, it goes down to what Russ was saying with regards to social media. And again, I'm sure a lot of the NHL players look at some of the NBA players and see sort of their engagement and want some of that because of the fact that of what they're able of the outside revenue streams that could offer them.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a big part of it as well. And I'm sure Tony probably looked at it and said, "Hey, there's a moniker or some sort of a thing out there for my views." And that's his personal political views in that circumstance. The problem is, and what you have to realize is, at the end of the day, you are every time that you go public and broadcast, you are representing the organization, and there are people in that circumstance, paying customers, that are not going to be on board necessarily with. And if you expect everybody to blindly support you, as in that circumstance, then I think it's extremely naive and foolish on his part. And very entitled on his part as well.
I'm for freedom of speech, but when you are playing for a team in a city that has been struck by the most by COVID, that is 80% liberal, that's all. And you are a loose cannon, big mouth MAGA head. What do you expect?
Well, let's go back to the
draft. It's going to be hard on you unless you're scoring.
No, but here's the thing.
There's reality to that. Like he's struggling on the ice. So let's put that together. Like he's struggling on the ice. Mm-hmm. If he's putting up massive numbers on the ice, a lot of that other stuff goes away.
Right. Some of it does, for sure.
These are all symptoms of a larger concern here of a person who is not focused in on the job that he is being paid a substantial amount of money to do. And there are expectations involved that come with that. Right. And for him, unfortunately, again, if those other areas are now coming into play and affecting your ability to perform, and also now affecting the very fabric of the organization that you're a member of, that locker room and the players you interact with. Nobody's going to say players are going to be hunky-dory and friendly and buddy-buddy with each other. You'd like that to occur. It helps with team chemistry, but at the same time, you cannot be potentially an active ingredient that causes strife in the room. I'm just not going to put up with it.
But here's the other thing at play, which got him bounced in Tampa and other places. So when the NHL draft happened in Philly, we were working that day. We didn't know what was going on. But on the NHL Network, he was mic'd up in the crowd with his dad. And the minute that he wasn't taken by the Flyers, his dad looked at him and said, "Well, you're never going to play for them." and that's the biggest mistake they've ever made. Something to that degree.
So it's very obvious that his father, obviously being
shaping his ideals.
Shaping his ideas. He was a major Flyers fan. The
Yeah.
opportunity was there. And again, I've seen this whole, tough guy, South Philly Italian, South Philly Italian guy who gets his. If there's any sort of, and listen, you're talking to a person who lived there lived the 21 years, first 21 years of his life. 7 blocks from the stadium complex. And I've seen this where it's an ego thing where even if it's like the littlest thing, it sets a person off and they hold that grudge and that chip on their shoulder the whole time. Now, if you use that in a positive mindset for motivating you in your career, that's one thing. But again, there's ways to sort of channel that.
Right. See, I always support him.
Being done the right way.
If you remember on the show, I always said this guy can play in the NHL. This guy's an NHL.
Absolutely. But again, if it's a cost of the skill set between Tony DeAngelo and Travis Sanheim, if you watch the both of them play, it's very obvious who was the more complete defenseman in junior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sanheim was always in that circumstance the better of the two.
But now we could see why DeAngelo got bounced from some other teams. That's my
the Flyers, being right from here, they were aware of him for a long time. They were aware of him. They were aware of him probably since he was like 10 or 11 years old. His dad's letting him know about him, stuff like that. That's happening.
Well,
so they've been following him, and they had a sense, and I agree. I mean, I remember watching DeAngelo play for Team USA at some junior tournament, I think it was. And I was just like, this kid is the real deal. I was just completely overwhelmingly impressed by him.
Yeah, but let me ask this in relation to other players, Russ, because there have been other players, and one that we both know who was drafted in the first round over the last few years that have had off the ice issues. Whether it be, Josh Hosang is very well known, obviously, but nothing like this. But will this have a chilling effect on future players who have similar issues, maybe not the same as DeAngelo, but similar type of off the ice things that teams will just say, it's not worth it. We're not going to draft this guy, no matter how talented.
The world has changed. So now the ideals have changed and what is in morality clauses and things in contracts. Just to give you an example, there were people in Sarnia who kept telling me things about the DeAngelo effect, and I pretty much ignored that and just kept giving him a chance. He never played on any of the USA Hockey teams, the elite teams. You have to wonder why, because he had elite skills as a young man, but a lot of times it's those other things that those kinds of teams might stay away from. And so you do have to look at the whole picture here. He did actually – scrolling down, he did finally play in the World Juniors.
Yeah, and that's right.
In 2015. Yeah.
In 2015. He finally was. That was the first time they took it.
He was really good.
And so he did play on that elite team. And so you do have to look at it and say, these things all matter, and they matter a lot. And again, why did Arizona only stay with him for the one season? Why did Tampa trade him so quickly? We're never going to.
There's some of that is also, again, it's that and also circumstances as well. I would also say in his defense, obviously we know a little bit now, but if we go back then, you probably looked at him as being again, it was certain the defensive area of his game, which still remained at the NHL level raw.
Yeah.
But it was enough, I think, of a chip where with those teams that he still had some modicum, he still had obviously a value.
Now,
but,
I just think it's weird he wasn't on an under 16 team, an under 17 team, an under 18 team. They finally took him in 20, but I just think it's weird he wasn't on any of those teams because he certainly is a known player.
I remember when that was happening and hearing things like, from their side of things and from people who I have a lot of friends who have kids who play hockey in the area and stuff like that. Of all saying, we never, South Jersey kids they never get the respect of the kids who come from Michigan and Minnesota and all that stuff. So, that's why he was being kept off the team because he was from South Jersey. I remember
Bobby Ryan gets respect.
Bobby Ryan did. I mean,
wait a minute, was Goss the spare?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was college again, but I mean, in terms of, we all know he was an elite level player, and he was from Florida.
Long Island guys. I mean, Jeremy Bracco was great.
I mean, you see it all the time. You do see it all the time, no question about it. But I think that this is more a case of like, I mean,
I will agree. They do that USA Hockey likes their hop. They like.
Yeah, I mean, you're a superstar player. Doesn't matter where you're from in America.
Whatever states in the union that are closest to Canada are the ones that Team USA likes.
But it's hard for me to believe. First of all, even if the Rangers retain 50%, I don't think there's going to be a taker for DeAngelo. It's hard for me right now in the current construct of the world that he gets another chance. That what
the other issue is, if it was just what we're talking about now, he'll get another chance.
Right.
At 50% retention, he would get a chance. But if there's something else that we don't know about that eventually comes to light, then he won't get a chance.
Right.
Or if he does, he's going to have to really sort of show a change of the way he operates and the way and all that. You have to show a certain level of contrition. Now, if he's not, again, if you got family in your ear telling you that, pardon my language, your poop don't stink.
Right.
Yeah. That's going to be an issue.
Now, Eck, we have to talk about this because it popped up late last week and over the weekend. The number of players that all of a sudden are asking to be traded. I mean, we had Dubois and we had Line and now
it worked, right? It worked for those guys.
It worked for those guys, and now all of a sudden in the last week, you had Vince Dunn requesting to be traded in St. Louis. You had Victor Mete asking to be traded in Montreal. And now Mete is in the lineup. They're sitting Kulak and playing Mete. He's going to probably play their next game. And you get the weird thing with Sam Bennett, who requested to be traded. Elliot Friedman talked to his agent Darren Ferris. Darren Ferris said yes, he's requested to be traded. And now today, Eric Francis has a piece saying he didn't request to be traded. Okay, what the hell's going on? It's like,
I'm guessing that piece today that Eric Francis wrote was one of those things of like, did you request to be traded? No, I didn't request to be traded. And
I didn't ask to be traded.
But
the problem is that for him is that then. Are you saying then your agent went rogue on national?
No, I'm saying that maybe the GM. Maybe I said to my agent, I wouldn't mind being traded, but I didn't tell the team. I didn't tell the team that.
But that's hard to believe, Anthony, because his agent.
I've heard this before. Though this is what happens. Like everything can be talked out of. Like you can sit there and say they know I'm not happy. The team knows I'm not happy. They said to me, "You're playing like you want to be traded." I'm like, "Well, you tell me." And that's the guy. I never went to him and say trade me.
You can't play this semantics game back and forth, especially when your agent gets out on national television with Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet and says one thing, and then a report comes out and says something else completely different. That no, I didn't ask to be traded.
Right,
and then you leave the appearance of, well, then as I just stated, are you telling us your agent went rogue on national television?
You gotta understand that players like Bennett. It looks bad on Bennett to still to do that. Like say his teammates don't know this happened.
Well, and it could also be as well the fallout a little bit also from Dubois.
Right, and
I think that's really where it's probably making.
I'm Bennett. I'm going to my teammates saying, "Oh man,
he knows his likelihood of being traded versus Dubois was less. He's not Dubois."
And the indicator here is, and this is what Friedman reported, is the fact that they've got Monahan, Lindholm, and I think Backlund up the middle. Lindholm shifted over.
He wants to be a center.
He wants to be a center. They shifted Lindholm from the wing to center. They like the way he's playing. He's either playing third line wing or fourth line center. And after the year that he had in terms of the playoffs, he scored 5 goals in 10 games in the playoffs. He thinks he deserves to play wherever he wants. The problem is, Russ, is that this guy was taken 4th overall, and in the regular season, he's never produced. I would say up to those expectations.
I would say not up to what, these lofty expectations, but he's still a decent hockey player. He gets double-digit goals.
I agree.
He does.
Do you know what he's like to me? I'll tell you honestly, Russ. He's like a macro version of Scott Lawton.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's a guy where your high expectations taken higher maybe than expected.
Yep.
And again, Lawton has rounded himself into a very valuable player for the Philadelphia Flyers. But again, there's a certain level of depth within the organization that makes it a little bit difficult for him to excel.
And also the fact that Lawton wasn't taken fourth overall helps Lawton in this case because, like, you know,
he was still taking what? But again, that's why I said it's a macro version of Lawton. Imagine in this case, most people thought Lawton was going to be a second-round pick, and he got taken in the first. And we're talking about a guy in Sam Bennett who was taken fourth overall. That's why I said
him being picked fourth overall and being picked by Brad for a living is the whole problem here because if they trade him, he wants to get the value commensurate with somebody who was taken fourth overall, and you're never going to get
that kind of stuff makes me insane though because it's like, and I've talked to some GMs.
But I also think they said Bennett was going to be a center, and that's why they took him overall.
Who's a thought on what Mike's saying there? And I've heard two GMs. You're right, Mike. There are some GMs who are like, yeah, we used asset for asset. Like he's a fourth overall pick. We got to get back something of that value. Da, 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 da. And then there's GMs who the better GMs that I talk to who just say, once he's on our team, he's just a player. Like it doesn't matter.
And that's the mindset at the end of the day. It doesn't matter where you're a pick. If you're looking to try to recoup the fourth round, it's been years at this point now. No, it doesn't matter.
Unfortunately, when the owner has a meeting with the general manager before the GM gets fired, and the owner looks at the fourth overall pick and Sam Bennett was a bust, that's why he gets fired, and why they don't get if you don't get equal value or what is perceived as equal value, that's another mark in the. That's never why you're fired.
That's never why you're fired. That's like what's thrown on there as like another justification to fire you. Like another that's like, oh, by the way, also the fourth, you picked fourth and fourth overall. Like to me, that's not any GM. No one's going to get fired for that. You know, people have picks.
It's one of a number of things that get him fired.
If the team sucks, then you can sit back and throw all the bad things out there, and you go to the kitchen sink at someone and say, "Yeah, this you did this and this and this and this and this and this." Yeah, I mean, I think it's the GMs who have more success are just like once he's on your team, it doesn't matter if you picked him up fourth or he was a walk on to camp. You know, it's just he's a player on your team. That's what
look. The same as Lawton, he would be more valuable if he were a center. He's not a center. Lawton's not a center either. He can play center, but Bennett can't really even play center. So it does diminish your value just for that. That's a reason they took him fourth overall because they were hoping he'd be a center. He's not a center. And they did think he'd be more of like a 25-goal guy, and he's not that.
You see, Lawton has turned into, like, I'd say the modern, if you're a Flyers fan, the modern day Murray Craven. Like,
yes, that's probably the best comparison to say that, you know, he is, you know, and you're talking about the sort of the spit and bailing wire that holds the roster together. That's especially in the bottom six, it's Scott Lawton. Plus, you can play him up again, as versatile as Craven was. You could also swing him out to wing on the top two line in a spot, but he's in his best role as that third line depth guy. That really
he's never going to be an all-star for you, but he's going to score a goal in overtime to beat the Capitals in the playoff series. Whatever. That's the kind of thing that's like. That's what Lawton, Craven.
I mean, Bennett will get 35 points in his better seasons for you, and there's still room for guys in that league. They just have to put down the asking price. That's all.
I mean, a nice little niche. Like he's become an overtime guy now too. Like that's something that he's like on the first line overtime of the first three players that are thrown out there. He's the guy put out there. Because he scores big goals and he's good
honestly, and also the way they use him well. And again, he's fat. One of the things that Keith Jones talked about this last night, and it's very true during the broadcast. Lawton's speed is really underrated. He is a fast player. Yeah, he really is.
You saw him fast.
And when you get into that overtime period, when you got open space like that, he is an app in a 3-on-3 circumstance. Even in a standard 5-on-5 overtime. He's an absolute threat out.
I don't think he's fast. I think he has better acceleration than he used to. Because I'm telling you, in his draft year, there were people that were telling me.
Absolutely, but
it has improved.
But Russ, he's fast. I absolutely.
Yes, I don't call him fast. I don't think he's
fast. He may not. If we're talking elite level fast, no.
No, I'm not even talking elite.
If we're talking about a guy who can keep up, I think, with most players in the.
I think his two-step quickness has gotten better, and that's when he can turn
his burst. His burst.
But I don't think overall he's a fast player. That's just me.
Just going back to the Rangers for a second, because Larry Brooks just posted this about an hour ago. They checked into the availability of Nils Lundqvist, who apparently is playing very well in the SHL.
Yeah, but he's in the SHL. They're probably not going to let him go.
Right. He's not available until after the season ends. Right. Plus, he's got to get a release from the Swedish Federation. So what does that tell you? That tells you that the Rangers don't have.
They're not going to use DeAngelo anymore this season. There's no question about that. Just bring up Ryuinen. I don't understand why you brought this guy over if you're looking at all these other options. That's typical Rangers. It just makes no sense. You give this guy a chance. He played well in Liga. He played for a couple different teams. This year he started out hot too. And again, whatever. Do whatever you want, but it's clear he's not going to play for the Rangers again this year, and he may not play in the NHL this year. I would say there's probably a 65% chance he doesn't play in the NHL this year.
Yeah, I've got something I want to get into. Have Anthony here too, and that is okay. So today, the guy famously known as Down Goes Brown, Sean McIndoe.
Sean McIndoe, yeah.
Sean McIndoe, yeah, who's really great. Writes great stuff. His latest article on The Athletic, where he does his top 5 and bottom 5 teams. He doesn't have the Flyers included in the top 5, and which is I don't think they're a top 5 team either. But he goes on to explain in detail why they're not a good team, which is an interesting thing to read. And I thought to get through it. He says they're 7-2-1. First place. The top 5 forwards are all scoring at close to a point per game pace. Provorov's getting a ton of ice time and is taking another step towards elite status. All that's good, right? He says, and yet, if you didn't know that what the standings look like, you could be forgiven for thinking there's a team in crisis. Last year's score was just a healthy scratch. The coach is calling players out. Recent headlines about poor process and early problems. And let's just say that at least among at least a certain segment of Flyers fans, there's an angst that's palpable. And it seems to be a lot for them. So what's the deal? These guys are good. Well, maybe not. A lot of concern for the Flyers these days focuses on shot counts, and the Flyers are getting pummeled. They've been outshot in 9 of having 10 games.
And now my big question to him is going to be, and those are all true.
Yeah.
Look at the Washington Capitals right now. They're also being outshot. Now, not at the level the Flyers are, but they're also being outshot by a substantial margin. And yet those are the 2 top teams in the East Division.
Yeah. And
I have 2 concerns that I don't think are going away for Philly.
No.
I still think the top pairing has affected their whole defense for the year. There's going to be a lot of rotation going on, and they can't hold leads. They are bad at holding leads.
Again, but you're also talking about the New York Islanders again.
I know.
Who are notorious in terms of their early third period ability to rally.
No, but they've given up leads against other teams too, I believe, not just the Islanders.
Yeah, they did against the Bruins the other day.
Yeah.
But both times they got
the upper echelon teams in the division who have substantial depth. I think in a long game, Philadelphia has had struggles with, no question about that.
Yeah,
and so I would say Sean isn't completely. Yeah, finish. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The possession numbers are ugly. Expected goal percentage is low, hovering in the low 40s. It's not translating to the scoreboard because they're getting a really high shooting percentage, which usually dictates at the end of the day shooting percentage doesn't hold up. They're getting great goaltending from Brian Elliott when he shows up, which is for sure.
No doubt.
And all in all, the Flyers look to be a classic team where their record things seem fine, but the warning lights are blinking all across the dashboard.
Yeah, I think
I can't argue that.
This is what I'm going to say is that again, that's across the board. Anybody who's been paying attention to this team knows that they have been fortunate, and that the record right now is without question a very fortunate 7-2-1.
Yeah,
they're doing this also they've also managed to do this without their team MVP in Sean Couturier, which is something that Sean did not mention there.
Which is huge. They
missed Phil Myers for a long stretch, who has rapidly turned into a pretty vital part of their blue lines as of last season. He and Travis Sanheim are key critical components. Well, Russ is pointing to as well as an area that a main concern for me as well, which is, again, Philadelphia's defense. Unlike last year when you had Matt Niskanen, and I know people are tired of hearing this, but Niskanen, it wasn't just mindset, but it was also the way he played. He had a pretty good, comeback season after a pretty rough one, the previous one in Washington.
Yeah.
He was very important to that blue line, their mindset, how they played, shot blocking, all of that.
For sure.
Now that blue line, they did keep Justin Braun, but Braun is not Matt Niskanen at the end of the day.
Right.
Philadelphia, I think, very much is missing that sort of and it's going to be tough for them to get. And they knew that when, there's a reason why multiple times they tried to get, are you sure about this before the announcement went out that Niskanen was going to retire, because they knew what kind of quandary that was going to put their young blue line in, not having him.
So,
5-on-5 has been a concern. I think the situation with Konechny as well. I think it was also a matter that I do wonder, and I'm going to say this, that had Sean Couturier not been injured, I would not have been shocked to see Kevin Hayes have been the scratch.
Yeah.
Than Travis Konechny would have been. But Konechny had struggled in his area in terms of scoring. His expected scoring chances were down. Last night was a solid game out of Konechny, but not fantastic. It was one of those things where he jumped off the page to me.
What I think is clear after 9 or 10 games in the NHL, in spite of the level of success of some teams, there's not a team in this league right now that doesn't have warts. I mean, the Flyers are 7-2-1, and we just discussed their problems. The Leafs are 7-2-1, and I found issues with the way that they're playing. There are other teams Colorado right now is 6-3-1. McKinnon got hurt yesterday. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Yeah. I don't like their goaltending. I mean, you can look down. I'd say about the 10 best records, and there is not a team on that list, short of maybe Tampa, that doesn't have a fatal problem that would kill them in the playoffs.
And let me tell you, you're so right, Mike. And let me tell you something that's really interesting, I think. And Anthony, Russ, and I are lucky that we're being able to see these things live. Which is really, really crazy because we know how fortunate we are to do that.
Keep rubbing it in, Ek.
Here's the thing about that, Mike. And this I went to the games I've been to. My third game last night. I went to the first game against the Penguins. I went to the first game against the Sabres, and I hadn't been back because the Flyers were on the road until last night, or until Saturday. I went to Saturday. Right. All right, so there's a big stretch in there. I was watching it on television like anybody else, and I'm like, it's good. When you're there live, you see how much better these players are getting over time. Like you really notice the difference way more. In the skill level of how the beginning of the season was like a preseason type, getting to know themselves again, getting their timing back, and now live you see like the speed and the energy level is just so very different. Like what they're able to do as the better they get, the further in the season. So I venture to say that we're going to be 10 games into the season really before teams are really where they are.
And if you can get off to a good jump as Philadelphia has, even if the process is not great.
Right.
Then when you do get your team MVP back into your lineup and all of a sudden things click into place in terms of your forward core the way you want it to be and you're not playing Nolan Patrick, who again, we're having the chance to talk with Vino before the game yesterday. We're talking about again where those guys are trying to kind of get back to where they were. Obviously with the long stretch and long time off, you're playing Nolan Patrick on the second line only 10 games back. And this is 10 games in after he missed over a year.
Yeah.
And he's playing
definitely
some top line in this series.
And Lindblom, a little bit of a step behind.
He actually, when yesterday was the first game where I saw him playing on the top line, you can't get away with it. He actually had some bad plays in that game. Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick has to be right now in a bit of a sheltered third line role or and he's still coming back.
And JVR is playing as good as he did in Toronto.
Honestly, JVR right now is having the most well-rounded stretch of his career. Honestly, I think maybe potentially of his career that I've seen in this opening 10 games. And it's not, again, we're used to JVR having net front presence. We talk about his being in tight. That's his best area. He's making some tremendous plays out there. Really good anticipatory play, pass plays that have made him into much more of a multi-purpose threat. But again, it is and again, for everybody who started commenting, say, let the Seattle Kraken know for the expansion draft. At the same time, I look at it as well with JVR that, it may have taken him a year to kind of get used to what Elaine wants and knows what he's going to necessarily need. And of course, he's probably looking at it and saying, I've been in the league for a while. Like to have an opportunity to get past the first round of the playoffs for once.
Okay, I'm just going to stay on this one more thing, Mike, because someone's asking about the Isles, and someone asked about Niskanen, why he wasn't good in the bubble. He didn't want to be in the bubble, but he went because he's a good teammate. That's why he wasn't good in the bubble. Right. And as far as the Islanders,
and he was better. Here's the thing: he was not good. He was noticeably not good against the Canadians. Yeah. He was a little bit better against the Islanders, but you could tell he was still struggling. Yeah. And when you had to, and they could shield it when they had Sanheim and Myers playing as well as they did in that first round series. When Myers and Sanheim struggled against the Islanders, then Philadelphia started having some serious trouble.
Here's the problem with the Islanders, and it's very simple. And I've seen it in this series, and I've seen it in other games. You're rotating in Oliver Wahlstrom, Kiefer Bellows, Austin Zarnik. You're playing them 8-9 minutes a game. You're hoping to get extra offense out of those guys, and you don't play them in the third period. And when it comes down to the third period, you're playing like the same 12 guys. And yes, they play great defense, and they might get you into overtime, but not enough of them are scoring, and you're not going to get these young guys to score using them that way.
They can't score. Now,
This is why they can't score.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, Funky in the chat said, well, hey, McDavid scored 5 points and Draisaitl scored 6. Okay, nobody is disputing the greatness of McDavid and the greatness of Draisaitl. I've just been pointing out that team is a cluster F because you've got McDavid and Draisaitl combining for 43 points. They're 1-2 in the NHL.
I'll tell you what they are. And again, I know I keep going to comparisons. They are like the younger brother version of the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, where you've got 2 all-world talents. Now, here's the thing: they're playing at the top of their game. And then the rest of the lineup is.
I was going to go further back, Anthony. They're like the LA Kings with the Triple Crown line, and basically, and you had Mario Lessard in goal who couldn't stop a beach ball if his life depended on it. SP.
Well, they had Rogie for a while.
No, I'm talking about the early 80s.
Yeah, the early 80s when they had that crazy line.
No. This is the thing. They played the Ottawa Senators. Right now, the Ottawa Senators have given up 44 goals against in 9 games. You know who's second worst? The Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. They can't stop anybody. And these poor guys have to put up multiple point nights to be able to even compete because their defense is so friggin' bad.
And it's a little bizarre because last year they sort of had this going and they had figured it out a little bit. Tippett had put some stuff together. And obviously, the loss, the big loss on defense for them has been
Klefbom,
And Klefbom's been huge for them, bigger than I thought it would be. I mean, he's been enormous. I mean, that's bigger than Niskanen out of the Flyers lineup. Klefbom out of the
Sure, but it shows the lack of depth, too. I mean,
and I you would think being somebody who in my past was a Leaf fan would not have any sympathy for Ottawa, but I have sympathy for the Senators right now because in that division they won their opening game and they've lost the last 8. And
I don't feel bad, and I'm going to tell you why I don't feel bad.
Okay.
Because again, the owner is not spending money on real veterans. He just spent money on short-term deals.
Right.
To say, hey, keep with us, Sens fans. Next year's our year. He keeps pushing the goalpost back, and that's
guys
fine.
Guys who don't want to be there, like a Branson and Stepan.
Right. And so you're bringing in a bunch of guys there. There's no chemistry. You're making it impossible for Matt Murray to stop pucks when there's no defense. It's ugly for him. It's just is it all going to get corrected next year? No.
Do you think Matt Murray regrets that 4-year contract?
I don't think he does because I think he knows he's not going to be there 4 years. He might be in Seattle next year.
Yeah. I mean, they gave up 6 goals on 12 shots last time. I don't ever remember seeing that 6 goals like halfway through the.
Yeah, it's awful.
3 minutes. In the
does
second
kind
period.
of go beyond the whole point of Murray. If he goes to Seattle, there was a lot of talk in Ottawa about trying to build the future around him. But again, we can always take those things with a grain of salt.
I think they're going to try. I think that's what they're going to do. I really do. Like talking to him, at least if the people who are in charge now are still in charge, they're not going to let him go to Seattle. He's going to.
No, but that's the talk. But that doesn't mean the finances will line up with the talk.
Yeah.
When a goalie, I think they have spent money on certain situations before. I think they'll spend money on Murray. I mean, it depends. Now, I did hear an interesting trade rumor about involving the other bad team, the Red Wings. And
they're bad.
They're bad. They're not as bad as the Sens right now, though. But
which is saying something. It's like a 375.
They're not sensational.
I'm sorry. They're like a 188 winning percentage. I'm not sure I've ever seen one that low.
But we may finally
wasn't as bad as McDonald.
We may finally see that Bobby Ryan return to Philadelphia thing this year.
It's not. I'm not going to see it.
I always thought we would never see it. I have always thought it was not ever going to be possible. But apparently, depending on injury situations of certain players, the Flyers do not want to be underpowered offensively going into the playoffs. They're going to look for it.
That's the least of their worries. They'll have Morgan Frost back. They'll have Couturier back.
Well,
Again, where they're currently at, and then obviously the dynamic potentially once you have Couturier back, and then at that point, I think then you reach that next stage of making that evaluation.
I
One thing
mean,
I do
what-
think Philadelphia does need beyond defense is
What makes
they
it
are going to need some bigger forwards, I think, for the bottom six.
what makes it in the realm of possibility is the fact that Ryan's on a 1 year, $1 million contract. But if you're telling me that let's just say Chuck Fletcher, if he's going to go out and make a move that is going to make a difference before the trade deadline, and he doesn't expend his assets to get a defenseman, he should be fired.
I don't disagree with that. I wouldn't fire him, but
I
I
wouldn't
would say
fire either. But he's got to go.
this is
out
a bad year
also,
for him.
honestly, let's call this for what it is. It is the heart of all the acquisitions that he could possibly make.
Right.
Yeah.
It is the toughest one.
Yeah, but I'm not giving him a pass for that because, again, other teams have been able to make.
No,
some
they've been able to
trades.
do it. The question is what the asking price
Well, but you
is.
sometimes have to overpay too.
So you're going to deal Morgan Frost then.
I don't know if it's going to be Frost. It's going to be somebody.
You know
but yes.
damn well that.
Well,
that's the
okay,
first
but
word that comes
here's
out of
the
that
thinking.
man's mouth.
If I am
If
getting
they know you're on the edge.
if I am getting a guy that I feel like if I slot in and I've got him for 3 or 4 years and I can get to the cup, then yes,
If
you might
that's a
have to
guy
trade.
you think you're going to be able to have versus what normally
Would-
which is available,
Then you might have
which
to
is
trade
usually
Frost,
a
yes.
rental. Then I'm not a move. Then I would
Anthony.
not move.
Yeah.
Would you give up? And I'm not talking about a top end prospect. Would you give up let's say, secondary prospect and a second round pick for a rental like a good Branson?
I wouldn't.
Not good Branson because I'm not a huge. I just,
He's Robert Hagg at this point. It does no
yeah,
good for
I'm
them.
not
Speed wise,
I'm not big on him. I need another name.
Same. It's Robert
I
Hagg.
need a
They don't
different,
need that.
different name. Not good Branson.
so they need a legitimate top 4 right
They
hand.
need a legitimate top four.
That's the reason why it's tough for them to figure out. That's why it's tough for them right now to get what they lost with Niskanen.
Right.
Intangibly, defensively, he had a snarl to his game.
Yeah.
He was willing to play. He got offense to his game, but he was mostly, again, it was all about what he was able to, how he balanced that. He's unquestionably by far the best defensive partner that Ivan Provorov has had in his young career.
So you're talking. I mean, just scanning through the league quickly. You're talking Goligoski. You're talking Demers.
You're getting into those names, and even then, they're not a complete a complete replacement for Niskanen. Which is
No, but at least Demers you could get
But
something out of it.
Demers is enough of a heady game
Right.
where I would certainly consider a secondary prospect.
Yeah.
Second round, I'd bite my lip on a little bit, but I would probably, depending on
You'd have to do it.
when the pick would be. But if it means acquiring that player and then having them maybe for a few years in that window that you were planning on having Niskanen, like in other words, if you have an idea, you acquire him and then you think you can get him signed to at least 2 or 3 more years within that window, then at that point, especially if you're letting go of a second round pick, and it depends on who the prospect is from
For sure. Well,
if they don't get aggressive like that, they aren't going to be able to fill this spot.
No, I agree with that. But the question is, again, what is out there, who's on the market, and then you got to be careful with who it is that you end up targeting.
Right.
Yeah. And this brings me to why the Bobby Ryan thing was brought up to me, and that was the concept of if you can't acquire somebody to help you stop goals, you have to get somebody who can help you score goals. Like that's the reality. Is
and in the playoffs, it never works.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work in the playoffs.
The Flyers last year they fell apart because they couldn't score in the playoffs.
But it works in the playoffs when you get like a greasy guy who has been great in the playoffs for his career. That is not Bobby Ryan, unfortunately.
No, they're going to need, again, in this circumstance, that they are going to go forward. It's got to be someone who, number one, has no issue being a missile and getting in front of the net. Philadelphia's issue, if anybody's for those who've been watching, is they struggle, when they get into games against the Islanders and teams like that, they struggle to consistently get into those areas where you're going to take some punishment.
Bobby Ryan doesn't do that.
Bobby Ryan is third line offensive depth and second power play. That's what he is.
Right. They don't really need that. They need what Anthony just said, and that's where I'm getting at with a greasy playoff veteran who you could put in. And like if Pavelski was on a 1-year deal, you would get Pavelski as an example. That kind of guy, yes, that is the valuable guy they need. A Nieuwendyk, even at the age of 40, even a Joe Nieuwendyk at the age of 40 was still like helping the Devils and was still really good for them. You can get that kind of guy, but it's not Ryan, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's just
You'll hear it. There's no question you'll hear it.
It's out there because he's playing as well as he's playing, and there's a feeling like that if they need a scorer, and Detroit's obviously going to move him, he's going to be traded. So we'll see how it plays out. All right, good times, guys. Fun times, everybody. Stay safe out there. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us today, everybody. We will be back again tomorrow, maybe under more snow and ice. Remember, without the buzz, we will talk to you then.